All right. You guys have buried us in information on Madhya Agro Products Limited, and, well, we're ready to dig in. I mean, we've got financial reports and stock filings, the whole 9 yards. Now, I know fertilizer might not sound like the sexiest topic, but this company,
Yeah,
it's got a story that's anything but boring.
you're absolutely right. It's way more than just dirt and crops. This is a company on a serious upward trajectory, and their story is fascinating, to say the least.
So where do we even begin? What exactly is Madhya Agro Products Limited, MBAPL for short? What's their deal?
Okay, so MVAPL is part of the Ostwald Group of Industries. They're big players in the fertilizer game. Just in the last quarter, they brought in something like Rs 284 crore in revenue. That turned into a profit of about Rs 18 crore, and they had a 13.9% EBITDA margin. Pretty healthy.
Whoa, 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 hold on a second. EBITDA margin. Break that down for us. For those of us who don't speak fluent finance.
No problem. Happy to. So EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's essentially a way to check out a company's core profitability. Like, imagine you're looking at their earnings fitness before you factor in things like debt and taxes. Basically, a higher EBITDA margin usually means the company is better at turning revenue into profit.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So 13.9% for MBAPL, is that good?
Yeah, that puts them in a pretty solid spot.
Hmm.
But what really sets MBAPL apart, they're India's only manufacturer of single superphosphate, SSP, and they've got complete backward integration. That's their claim to fame.
Backward integration. Another one of those terms. What does that even mean in the world of fertilizer?
Okay, imagine you're baking a cake. Instead of just buying pre-made flour, you decide to grow your own wheat, mill it, and then use that flour for your cake. That's backward integration in a nutshell. And MBAPL, they don't rely on anyone else for their key ingredients. They control the whole process, from sourcing the raw materials to actually producing the finished fertilizer product.
Oh, so like a fertilizer farm to table.
Uh-huh. You could say that. It gives them incredible control over their costs and their quality, which is a big deal in such a competitive market.
All right, so they make their own unique fertilizer and they keep a tight grip on the whole process. What else makes them stand out?
Well, for one, they've got a huge distribution network. We're talking over 30,000 retailers all across India. They also have a good credit rating and strong market share for SSP in some big states like Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Oh, and their return on capital employed, or ROCE, that's worth noting too. It's at 18%.
ROCE. All right, you're going to have to break that one down too.
Think of ROCE as how effectively a company uses its money to make a profit. A higher ROCE means they're using their investments well. So for MBAPL, it's definitely a good sign.
Gotcha. So they've got a solid financial foundation, a unique product. Sounds like a recipe for success. But you know me, I always love a good plot twist. And speaking of plot twists, that board meeting outcome document you sent over, the one about a qualified institutions placement, or QIP, that seems like a big deal, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Raising up to Rs 200 crore through a QIP. They're getting ready for something big. A QIP basically is a way for companies on the stock market to raise capital by selling shares to qualified institutional buyers.
So it's like a VIP stock sale for those big-time investors. Serious money. And, considering how well they've been doing financially, this QIP gets even more interesting.
Let's unpack those financials a bit.
Yeah, give me the highlights.
Well, their revenue is up 16.4% compared to this time last year, mainly because they're selling a lot more SSP and NPK. NPK is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, by the way. It's basically the essential stuff you find in a lot of fertilizers.
So their classic product and the more complex stuff are both doing well. That's got to be a good sign, right?
Yeah, it definitely suggests that they're hitting the mark on multiple fronts, catering to different parts of the market. But here's where the numbers really jump out. Their EBITDA has gone up by a crazy 119.4% year on year.
Whoa, that's a lot of percent. What about their profit? Did that see a similar jump?
Okay, get this. Their profit after tax, also known as PAT, it's seen an unbelievable jump of 1,276.9% year on year.
You're kidding, right? Over 1,000%. That's insane. What's driving this crazy growth?
Well, they've been super efficient, especially in their DAP and PK plants. They've also benefited from stable government subsidies. And a pretty good market for fertilizer right now.
Right, makes sense. People got to eat, which means farmers need fertilizer. But I bet they're not just going to sit back and ride this wave. They're raising all this money through the QIP, so they must have some big plans up their sleeve, right?
Oh yeah, you bet. MBAPL has some bold growth strategies in mind. And that QIP, that's probably the fuel they need to actually make it all happen. But we'll have to save those exciting details for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dig deeper into this fertilizer story. I'm still a bit blown away by those profit numbers. MBIPL seems to have figured something out.
Yeah, they're doing pretty amazing, aren't they? Yeah. It's easy to focus on the numbers, but the story behind them is even more impressive. It's fascinating how MBAPL went from a small operation to a big player. They actually started with just one SSP plant back in 1997.
Oh, wow. So they weren't exactly born with a silver spoon then?
Nope, not really. But things changed for them big time in 2004. That's when the Ostwald Group acquired them, and that's when things really took off.
The Ostwald Group, we talked about them before. They've got that Midas touch. What's their secret? Just luck. Or is there a method to their madness?
I mean, luck might be part of it, but their strategy is what really sets them apart. One of their key strategies, as we mentioned, is backward integration. Remember our cake baking analogy?
Yeah, of course. Grow your own wheat instead of buying flour. MBAPL is doing that, but with fertilizer ingredients, right?
Exactly. MBAPL figured out they could process low-grade rock phosphate into the high-grade stuff. And that's a crucial ingredient for fertilizer.
Oh, I see. So instead of being at the mercy of suppliers and prices going up and down, they took control of the whole thing.
Exactly. It's brilliant. It helps them keep costs down, and they've always got a steady supply, like having a secret weapon in a really competitive industry.
It's like they built their own fertilizer fortress, brick by brick. Sounds like they were setting themselves up for success from day one.
You got it. And they didn't stop with just rock phosphate. They kept going, expanding to sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid, and then finally, those DAP NPK fertilizers.
Wow, it's like they were building a whole fertilizer empire, step by step.
Yeah.
They started with the basics and added on those more complex products.
That's exactly how they did it. Each move was carefully planned, making sure they were as efficient and profitable as possible. They even put their plants close to the raw materials and major transportation routes. Smart, right?
Yeah, cutting down on transportation costs. Classic. So it seems like they were obsessed with every single little detail.
They really paid attention to the details. They were constantly fine-tuning, always trying to improve. And that shows in how well they're doing financially.
It all makes sense now. Those big revenue numbers and those crazy profits. They're not just luck, they're years of hard work and smart planning. Speaking of smart moves, their plan to go after the import market for DAP and PK. That's pretty gutsy, isn't it? Taking on international competition, that's not easy.
It's bold, for sure. But if you think about it, it makes sense for them. They've got a history of keeping their operating costs low, and they're really good at turning around companies that are losing money. This tells us they might be able to compete on price and efficiency, even on a global scale.
And we talked about their expertise in getting those raw materials. That could really help them with those tricky international supply chains, right?
Absolutely. They've already shown they can handle sourcing ingredients from all over the world, but expanding within India, like their new facility in Maharashtra, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that seems like they're heading into uncharted territory. Maharashtra is a huge state.
Yeah, and guess what? Maharashtra happens to be one of the biggest consumers of NPK fertilizers in India. It's a new area for MBAPL, but the demand, it's definitely there.
Okay, so they're taking on a new market, but it's a market with a lot of potential. Makes sense. Plus, their new facility is near a major port, easy access to imported raw materials, and it's a gateway to the rest of India.
You got it. They're not just planning to enter the market, they're setting themselves up to really dominate it. But expanding, well, that's just one part of their plan. They also want to shake things up with their products. Remember their idea to get into the chemicals market?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Seems like a pretty big jump from fertilizer. Are they sure they can pull that off?
It's definitely different from what they're used to. But remember, MBAPL's parent company, the Ostwald Group, they have a reputation for doing well when they venture into new areas.
Right, right. They're like the fearless explorers of the business world, always on the lookout for something new. But we've been talking a lot about strategy and numbers. What about the people behind MBAPL's success? Who are the brains behind all of this?
That's a really good point. It's not just about brilliant strategies. It's also about the people who put those strategies into action. And it all starts at the top, with the Ostwald brothers. They're the driving force behind the whole Ostwald Group.
We mentioned their names earlier, but tell me more about them. What makes them such a powerful force in the fertilizer industry?
Well, M.K. Ostwald, he's the chairman and founder of the Ostwald Group. He's a total veteran, over 40 years of experience. He's considered a pioneer in making SSP, using that rock phosphate method we talked about.
So he's the one who laid the groundwork for MBAPO's success. Amazing. What about his sons, Pankaj and Praveen? What's their role?
Oh, they're not just coasting on their dad's success. They're super involved in shaping the future of the group. They've actually turned around several fertilizer companies that were struggling. They've got a knack for seeing opportunities where others just see problems.
It's like they can turn fertilizer lemons into lemonade. They're not afraid to take risks. But are they just about the money? Or do they have a bigger vision? What about sustainability, social responsibility?
It's actually great to see that they care about more than just the bottom line. In their presentation, they highlighted how committed they are to making their fertilizers eco-friendly and to promoting sustainable ways of farming. They even mentioned they're involved in community development projects.
That's really encouraging to hear. They get that a sustainable business isn't just about profit. It's about making a real difference in the world.
Exactly. They're not just making fertilizer, they're trying to create a better future for their business and for the people they serve.
This deep dive has been quite the journey, hasn't it? We've covered so much, from their humble beginnings to their ambitious plans, from their brilliant strategies to their commitment to sustainability. But we're not done yet. There's still more to explore.
Absolutely. In the last part of their deep dive, we'll get into those finer details of their finances. Things like their production volumes and sales trends. We'll see how those impressive numbers actually translate into real results. Stay tuned. The story of Madhya Agro Products Limited isn't over yet.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our look at Madhya Agro Products Limited, and I'm excited to see what these numbers tell us. We've heard about their ambitious plans, but can they actually deliver? Does their performance back it all up?
That's a big question, isn't it? And honestly, I think the numbers tell a pretty convincing story. They're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. Remember how they were talking about increased capacity utilization?
Yeah.
Especially in those DAP and PK plants.
Yeah, they were pretty proud of hitting 85% utilization on those, I remember. But to be honest, I didn't really know what that meant. Is that actually a big deal?
It's huge. It's not just about making more fertilizer, it's about doing it efficiently. They're really maximizing their resources, getting the absolute most out of those plants. Imagine a well-oiled machine running perfectly. That's what's happening here.
So they're not just building new factories, they're making sure the ones they have are working at full speed. Smart. But it's not enough to just produce a ton of fertilizer, right? They need people to actually buy it. What do the sales numbers look like?
The sales figures, they really show how their strategy is working. Their SSP sales volume went up 5.4% year on year.
Yeah.
That's pretty good growth, especially since SSP is their more established product. It shows they're holding strong even in a more mature market.
Okay, so their classic fertilizer is still doing well. What about the fancier stuff, the NPK?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. NPK sales volume, up a huge 43.8% year on year. It's not just growth, it's a total surge. Clearly, their move into this more complex fertilizer segment, it's really paying off. They're tapping into that growing demand and riding that wave.
It's like they found the perfect spot in the market and they're knocking it out of the park. But we're not just talking about selling more, we're talking about selling smarter, right?
They were pretty excited about that EBITDA per ton number.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They reported a blended EBITDA per ton of about ours, 4,650. It all comes back to their vertical integration strategy. They're controlling those raw material costs, which means they can generate much higher margins, way higher than if they were buying everything from someone else.
Wow, it's a perfect cycle, isn't it? Higher production, higher sales, higher margins. No wonder they're so confident about those big expansion plans. But there's one thing we haven't talked much about. Sustainability. They seem pretty passionate about it, but does being green actually make them more money? It definitely can, and MBAPL seems to get that. People want products that are made responsibly, and that includes fertilizer. Farmers, especially the ones who sell their crops internationally, they have to adopt more sustainable practices. And MBAPL, they're putting themselves out there as a leader in this area. They're offering fertilizers that meet these new demands.
So it's not just like a feel-good marketing thing, it's actually good for business. By offering eco-friendly options, they're bringing in new customers, and they're building a reputation as a company that's looking ahead.
Exactly. And by promoting sustainable farming, they're helping their customers, the farmers. They can get better yields while being kinder to the environment. It's a win for everyone, including the planet.
Okay, so we've seen it all. MBAPL is killing it. Strong financials, a solid plan, and a real commitment to sustainability. They've definitely impressed us with this deep dive. But as we wrap up here, what's the big takeaway for our listeners?
You know, I think MBAPL's story gives us a really valuable lesson. Success isn't just about a cool product or a flashy marketing campaign. It's about having a vision, a plan, and the discipline to stick to it.
They're not just riding the wave, they're making their own waves, and they're steering the ship.
Exactly. And they're doing it while looking to the future, they're watching the trends, and they're making sustainability a core value. They're not just trying to make a quick buck, they're building something that'll last.
It's pretty inspiring to see a company that thinks big and isn't afraid to try new things. They're showing us that success can be profitable and sustainable at the same time.
And that's a lesson that goes way beyond fertilizer. Tech, retail, whatever field you're in, vision, strategy, execution, they matter everywhere.
MBAPL has given us a masterclass in how to do it right, and I have a feeling this is just the start for them. They're definitely a company to keep an eye on. But for now, we'll leave our listeners with this. What's next for MBAPL? Will they become a global fertilizer giant? Will they completely change the chemical industry? Only time will tell. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.